Hey everybody, welcome back for another deep dive.
hmm
Today we're going to be taking a look at AlertMeter and how it plays a part in building a people-focused safety culture. And this is something that I know a lot of you are thinking about. And one of the things that I think you already realize is that when it comes to safety, it's not just about, wearing your hard hat and your safety goggles and all that. It's about the people.
Absolutely.
The people are at the heart of any organization.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things is to think a little differently about impairment.
Okay.
And it's not just about someone showing up to work, drunk or high, but it's also about stress fatigue. Even if you're a little under the weather, those can be just as dangerous when you're at work and have a certain job to do.
Right. And the National Safety Council, the NSC, actually has a definition for workplace impairment, and it's pretty broad.
Yeah.
It's basically anything that prevents somebody from working safely, whether it's chemical, physical, or even social factors.
It's interesting, that approach, it really mirrors what the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, is doing with impaired driving.
Oh, really?
Obviously they're focused on alcohol, but they're also looking at things like drowsiness and distraction behind the wheel.
Okay.
And each of those presents a unique challenge, not just for, detecting it, but then also how do you prevent it?
So let's talk about AlertMeter. How does this technology actually help us address all these different, facets of impairment?
Well, AlertMeter really stands out, I think, because it takes a more holistic approach compared to other, methods out there that might be looking for one specific cause of impairment.
Uh-huh.
It's designed to really pick up on subtle signs of cognitive distress, which could come from a variety of sources.
So it's not like a breathalyzer that's just looking for alcohol.
Exactly. It's not a breathalyzer.
Okay.
It actually uses what's called a psychomotor vigilance test, or PVT for short.
Okay.
And basically, it measures your reaction time and accuracy to a stimuli on the screen. Kind of like a simple game.
Okay.
And then by analyzing those responses, it can actually tell whether your alertness and cognitive function is impaired, and it doesn't really matter the cause.
That's pretty neat. I mean,
Yeah.
what I also think is really interesting about it is it doesn't require any bulky or specialized equipment.
Right.
Like you said, it's kind of like a game on a tablet or a phone. So it seems
Right.
like it would be pretty practical for, any type of workplace.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that user-friendliness is a big part of what makes AlertMeter so effective, and it only takes about a minute to complete the test.
Wow.
And the interface is, designed to be very intuitive, so it makes it really easy to implement in a variety of settings and get buy-in from employees.
So it's quick, it's easy to use, doesn't require, setting up a whole bunch of equipment. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and there's another key advantage here we need to emphasize, that it's completely non-invasive and non-discriminatory. So it's based solely on your cognitive performance at that moment in time. It doesn't rely on, any physical characteristics or any personal information, which is huge when you're talking about, fairness and respect for employees.
That's a really good point, especially when you think about, the potential for bias or privacy concerns with some other types of testing.
Yeah.
With AlertMeter, it seems like you're getting that objective measurement without intruding on anybody's personal space or, making them feel like they're being singled out.
Right. And I think that's a big part of what makes it so powerful for building that people-focused safety culture. You're demonstrating to your employees that you're invested in their well-being in a way that's respectful and dignified.
Yeah, so we've talked about, how AlertMeter works. We've talked about, some of the advantages of it, but how does it fit into this larger picture of, building a people-focused safety culture?
That's a great question. And I think it's really important to emphasize that, technology, even something as sophisticated as AlertMeter, is only one piece of the puzzle. It's a valuable tool, but it needs to be part of a larger strategy.
So it's not just about, plugging in a piece of technology and expecting everything to magically get better.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
A true people-focused safety culture starts with a fundamental shift in mindset.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that your employees are your most valuable asset and that their well-being is intrinsically linked to the success of your organization. And it's about creating an environment where people feel safe and supported and empowered to, speak up about concerns without fear of retribution.
Right.
It's about fostering a sense of, shared responsibility for safety, where everyone understands that, their actions impact not just themselves, but those around them.
I like how you phrase that shared responsibility because it really does, highlight the fact that a people-focused safety culture, it goes beyond just, following the rules and checking the boxes. It's about really, creating this mindset where everybody is actively looking out for each other and, proactively identifying those potential risks.
Exactly. And that's where I think AlertMeter can be such a powerful tool, It helps us move beyond just relying on observation or, subjective judgments, which can be unreliable and prone to bias.
Right.
By providing that, objective measure of impairment, it allows us to, have those crucial conversations about well-being in a way that's data-driven and focused on, support rather than blame.
You touched on something earlier that I wanted to circle back to, and it was that idea that AlertMeter can detect impairment even when, somebody might not be aware of it themselves.
Yeah.
And that seems particularly relevant when we're talking about things like fatigue or stress.
Yeah.
They can really kind of creep up on you gradually. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. We all have those days where we're running on fumes, right? But we kind of convince ourselves that we're fine to push through. The problem is our brains don't always cooperate with our best intentions. And so AlertMeter, it kind of acts as an early warning system, catching those subtle, dips in our cognitive function that we might not even notice ourselves.
So it's like having, an extra set of eyes, but these eyes are focused on, how our brains are actually functioning, not just how we're acting outwardly.
That's a great way to put it. And because it's based on a standardized test, it's fair and consistent for everyone.
Right.
It takes the guesswork out of assessing impairment and allows us to, have those conversations with employees in a way that's not confrontational and is focused on finding solutions.
So I'm picturing a scenario where, a manager notices that an employee has had a few lower than usual scores on AlertMeter.
Right.
And instead of, jumping to conclusions or reprimanding the employee, they can have a conversation that starts with, hey, I've noticed you haven't been yourself lately. Is everything okay? Are you getting enough sleep? Is there anything we can do to support you?
That's exactly the kind of approach we want to encourage,
Yeah.
Shifting that mindset from gotcha to how can we help? And that can have a ripple effect throughout the entire organization.
Earlier, we talked a little bit about the fact that there are other technologies out there that, focus on detecting specific types of impairment like drugs or alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
How does AlertMeter compare to those more targeted approaches? What are some of the trade-offs to consider?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it really depends on the specific needs and concerns of each workplace.
Okay.
Targeted tests like breathalyzers or drug screenings certainly have their place, especially in safety-sensitive industries or when there's reasonable suspicion of, substance use.
Right.
But the advantage, I think, with AlertMeter is that it casts a wider net. It's not limited to just, one or two specific causes of impairment.
So it's like having, a multi-tool instead of just a hammer.
Exactly.
You can address a wider range of problems with it.
Precisely. And remember, impairment isn't always, a black and white issue.
Right.
There are degrees of impairment, and what might be acceptable in one situation could be dangerous in another.
Mm.
And so AlertMeter provides that, nuanced understanding of an individual's cognitive state, which allows for more tailored interventions.
This brings up another question that I've been thinking about. Let's say a manager has an employee who's consistently scoring low on AlertMeter. Even after they've, tried adjusting their work schedule or offering access to, resources, what happens then? What are the next steps?
Well, that's where having, clear protocols in place is crucial.
Okay.
And this ties back to what we were talking about earlier, building that culture of trust and open communication.
Right.
If an employee continues to struggle despite efforts to, support them, it might be necessary to explore additional options such as, temporary reassignment to less safety-sensitive duties or, seeking guidance from, occupational health professionals.
So it really sounds like the key here is to approach these situations with empathy and a genuine desire to help the employee rather than resorting to, punitive measures.
Absolutely. Remember, the goal is to create a workplace where everyone feels safe and supported. And sometimes that means recognizing when an employee needs additional help and providing them with the resources and support they need to, address the underlying issues affecting their well-being.
Well, this has been such an eye-opening conversation. It's clear that you're deeply passionate about this topic, and your insights have really helped me understand how AlertMeter can be, such a powerful tool for building a safer and, more supportive workplace.
Well, thank you. I truly believe that by taking, a holistic approach to safety, one that considers the well-being of our employees as paramount, we can create a work environment where everyone can thrive, and technology like AlertMeter can play a vital role in that journey.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the importance of a people-focused safety culture to the practical applications of AlertMeter. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on one final point that I think is particularly relevant for our listeners. We've talked about how AlertMeter can help individuals, but how can organizations as a whole benefit from implementing this technology?
Well, that's a really crucial question, because when we talk about safety, it's not just about protecting individuals, it's about protecting the organization as a whole.
Right.
And when you have, employees that are impaired, whether it's due to fatigue, stress, any other factor, it can lead to a whole host of problems for the organization, decreased productivity, increased errors, a higher risk of accidents, and even, reputational damage.
It makes you realize that investing in employee well-being isn't just, the right thing to do. It's a smart business decision.
Exactly. And I think AlertMeter can help organizations, quantify that return on investment.
Okay.
By, proactively identifying and addressing impairment companies can reduce lost workdays, improve efficiency, and really create a safer and more productive work environment for everyone.
In our research, one thing that really stood out to me was AlertMeter's focus on data privacy.
Right.
Which seems especially important, given the sensitivity around employee health information. Can you talk a little bit about how they handle that?
Yeah, absolutely. Data privacy is paramount. And, AlertMeter is designed with that in mind. The data collected is anonymized and aggregated so that individual employees can't be identified.
Right.
It's not about tracking people or creating a big brother environment.
So it's about using data to identify, trends and patterns rather than singling out individuals.
Precisely. The goal is to use the data to gain insights into, overall workforce well-being and develop strategies that, support a culture of safety and proactively address potential risks.
So it sounds like AlertMeter can be a valuable tool for, both individuals and organizations.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up here, I want to leave our listener with something to think about.
Okay.
What's the most important thing that they should remember about AlertMeter and, building this people-focused safety culture?
I think the biggest takeaway is that, safety isn't just a box to check. It's an ongoing journey, It's about constantly striving to create a workplace where everyone feels safe, supported, and empowered to, do their best work. And technology like AlertMeter can be a valuable tool in that journey, but it's not a magic bullet.
It's a reminder that technology is only as good as the people using it.
That's right. The real key is to create a culture where safety is everyone's responsibility and where people feel comfortable, speaking up, raising concerns, and supporting each other.
Well said. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation.
And to you, our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a fresh perspective on safety and the role that technology like AlertMeter can play. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and as always, stay safe.